Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Well Aware podcast. Again, I'm your host, Conrad Ruiz of Well Aware. Today with me is Christopher Edney of Sigma Squared. Chris and I have built a relationship that's been centered around these very pragmatic discussions between selling yourself for time versus selling yourself on the concept of value. And what I think Chris brings to the table, he's going to introduce himself, he's going to share a little bit of his background. But I think what is interesting about the two eclectic approaches that Chris and I are currently taking is they complement one another, they don't compete. And in today's show, I think we're going to get into basically three main topics. We're going to talk about automations a little bit. Then we're going to talk about the difference between charging people by the hour versus charging people by the performance or the project work that you're essentially getting into, like the scope. And then finally, we're going to talk about how that all appreciates into value-based selling. Chris, good for you being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Conrad. It's exciting to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. Chris, can you kick us off with a bit of an introduction to yourself, who you are, where your background comes from? I think it's going to shed a lot of light into how you've come to approach business on a very financial basis when it comes to selling, designing automations, and the different types of performances that you do for other companies.
Yeah. So I've been in finance since I was 14. I'm 19 now, so about 5 years. Kidding. I've been in finance for a long time, and in that I've been in all aspects of finance. So I started out in a loan office, then I was in banking, then I sold insurance, then I did wealth management, then I did treasury management. I've been in real estate. If you can think of it in finance, I've probably done it or touched it. So that's given me a broad basis of kind of a broad foundation to build from. But I also think that I'm lazy, and what I mean by that is anything that I can get the computer to do for me, I want to teach the computer how to do it so that I get my time back. And that really started just very basic with Excel macros, just teaching Excel how to do very simple tasks for me and then much bigger tasks. And then I actually spent some time working as a financial analyst with Abbott Nutrition. It's a very big multinational company. And I had to review about 1,200 pricing contracts every year. In order to get through that, I had to look at 300 line items of products. And over time, I realized that my entire job, all 1,200 contracts, fall into one of three categories. It's A, B, or C. And I realized my job is an algorithm, nothing more than that. So if I can figure out the algorithm, I could automate my job. So I started doing that. And at first, it was just a simple overlay. I put some calculations in Excel. I did a simple copy and paste, found out is about 98% accurate, refined it a little bit more. And then I thought, I wonder if I can use a macro to have it copy and paste for me. Figured that out. And then I thought, I wonder if I can use some automation to cycle through all my contracts, paste the same thing in, and give me a chance to review it. Once I figured that out, I could come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, turn on my computer, hit go down to the cafe, get a cup of coffee, BS with friends for a little while. 20 minutes later, I come back. My work for the day is done. And then I look over to my friends like, hey, you want me to knock out yours? You want me to take care of yours? So by 9 o'clock, the entire department's work was ready to go. And I thought this was going to get me a big promotion. What it did was it got me a lot more work. But that more work gave me access to databases, very big databases. I mean, everything from like a small SQL Access SQL database up to Teradata, which had billions of records in it. And it just started to grow more and more and more, learning more about automation. And even those bigger tasks were being fully automated just over the course of my time there. And I realized when I was there that there is a market for this all across the world, but certainly all across the US, where there's simple automations that could be done in your daily tasks to give you a significant amount of time back. And that was really the genesis for Sigma Squared.
And Chris, I wanna take one particular word that you use that I think a couple of folks are going to maybe not be all too familiar with in sort of the broader concept of it. Like I want to make this particular term more accessible is what I'm getting at. you use the term algorithm. My work was effectively or essentially an algorithm. What does that mean to you in layman's terms?
No, I'm getting into nerd talk, and you gotta stop me. 100% nerd here. So an algorithm is basically a function. So I once heard somebody say, if you can define the problem better than your client, they will automatically assume that you have the solution. And really, that's what it comes down to. How can you define exactly what you've done, what you do on a regular basis, break it into steps, and then if you can do that, you can start to teach the computer how to do those steps for you. And
So in other
not everything
words,
fits into a perfect algorithm.
yeah.
Many things do.
So in other words, it is an algorithm is just a process. It's a workflow. It is a series of steps and tasks and actions. And yet
Yep.
in computer speak necessarily, an algorithm can be, to your point, it's essentially defined as a function. These tasks are performed in series, and you as the user in most of these algorithmic type tasks or task sets, you're just the one performing all of the steps. You're the one moving objects or information from one status to another, or from one position or location to another, which is just another way of saying status. And so, to your point, you're saying, well, if the computer has the means to do these things itself, given it understands the rules of what exactly it is you're doing. So if it understands the decision making process, when I say understand, I mean it's just you've laid out the decision making itself. It's just executing based on how those decisions are made. Given you're the human and you've designed that those decisions, then the rest is just let the tool do the work itself.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
I think about it this way. If if you did the same thing every day, and I could do nothing but record your keystrokes, where you click on the screen, record your keystrokes, then I should be able to play that back and reproduce what you did manually.
Right.
And
Now,
that's the general
granted,
idea.
and this is where I think we should sort of start to transition into our second focus topic of today, which is this idea of the hourly retainment versus the project-based retainment. Because to your point, when you were working at your previous job, the the relationship dynamic you had with that company, the business model they had with you was, Chris, we pay you a set amount to be available for XYZ a number of hours. Whatever amount of work that you do, like obviously there's a minimum threshold of productivity that you need to meet in order for the business to remain profitable and sustainable. But to that end, any additional work that you do, well, that's the company's bread and butter, not yours.
Yeah.
Um, and especially if you choose to automate the absolute living world daylights out of everything that you need to get done, well, guess what? According to your contract, there's always going to be more work for you to do. That's never going to change. Now, to that end, and this is sort of where I'm going out of the business logic, because I've talked to so many different business owners about the value of automation, and it's specifically about the value of delegation. Because for me, rather than pursuing the automation approach right out the gate, my first thought process is, okay, I understand what you're doing, so I'm following with you all the whole way through. Of like, I just want to watch your keystrokes, I just want to watch the way you behave, because I'm going to get someone else to replicate that behavior.
Yeah.
And I know that based on the way globalization has come to work out, I know I can find some of the most cost effective labor out there across the planet that's going to be able to do this
Mm-hmm.
work for you, and they're going to be happy to do it. And that's where I would start. Then at some point the math switches, and for depending on the business model, and this is what we're going to get into right now, automation suddenly becomes the more valuable return on investment, because you can only take on a recurring operation so many times for so many hours, assuming the amount of hours it takes to get that operation done. You can only do it so many times before you can then start to justify, okay, well, if I automated this, it's going to cost me more to hire a Chris in the world to come in and do what a Clint in our world can do. But in order for me to hire Chris, it's going to be more expensive than Clint's hourly. In fact, as I imagine you're going to tell me, the cost of your time, Chris, is not per hour, but rather for the project. So talk me through that.
Yep.
Let's move into that conversation bit about the difference between and the context around value-based selling and, or in this, at least in this case, let's leave value-based selling off to the side. Let's talk just about hourly costing versus project costing. How has that come to your world of business?
Well, I'm really glad that you said return on investment, because everything comes down to the ROI. And if I've got if I've got a task that I'm going to do one time, I'm not going to automate it. If I've got a task that I do twice a year, I'm probably not going to automate it. But if I've got a task that I do every single month or every single week or every 10 days, then all of a sudden I'm thinking of ways, how can I automate this? And the most accessible way is probably what you provide, which is having a valuable resource that I can count on to do this time and time again. And I know it will get done. The problem that you run into with that is a client or whomever you have can only do it so fast. So what if you've got 100 of these to get through or 1,000? I can only work as fast as Clint can work, and eventually Clint has to sleep. So then you start to look at the ROI, the return on investment of what if I did a one-time payment, a one-time investment into automating this task. So not necessarily, not even a monthly recurring, but I spend money one time to get those hours back. And often the way I talk to clients is I'll sit down, this is a perfect example. I just had this conversation a month ago. There was a bookkeeper. She was spending 10 hours a week doing exactly the same thing for a client. She was basically looking at data that was in Google Sheet. She was creating a bunch of invoices. She was creating a bunch of bills. She was creating a bunch of payments against those bills and then receiving payments against the invoices. She did the same thing every single week, and it took about 10 hours. And I looked at that and I said, okay, I'm going to ask you a personal question, but what do you pay yourself? And she said, well, I pay myself about 80,000 a year. It's like, one, for a bookkeeper, that's really good income. Nice job. I said, so would it be fair to say that you're spending at least a quarter of your time doing this? And she said, well, yeah, I guess if you put it that way. Okay. So does that mean that you're on average spending $20,000 a year to do this one task? Okay. I see where you're going with that. What if for a fraction of that 20,000 one time, you could get 90+% of that time back? What if I could give you a process that took 10 minutes, not 10 hours? Is that something that would be attractive to you? And every single time I've had that conversation, the other side is like, okay, yeah, walk me through that.
Right.
And as I said before, if you can define the solution better than your client, if you can define the problem better than your client, they will automatically assume you have the solution. So I start going into, okay, well, I think I would do this, and I put it together this way, and we could use this process to bring it here, and we could automate 95% of this to where all you've got to do is hit this button, and this button, and you got all your time back. So that's something you like to do. And many of them think, okay, you're a wizard. Like, no. Any technology advanced enough, any technology advanced enough is going to look like magic, but it's not. If you just know how to put the pieces together, if I'm watching your process and you have to go from A to D, and I can figure out how to connect A to B to C to D and remove you from that equation, I can develop a tool that will give you all that time back.
So to your point, Chris, and this kind of ties into your positioning on value-based selling in this regard, your objective is to say, look, I recognize you've established an existing benchmark for success with this workflow. I know that you're able to generate, in this case, $20,000 a year is worth of value, or in this case, the full workflow for this bookkeeper is 80,000, right? But to your point, cost of goods sold in this operation is, $20,000 worth of that time is being invested across 10 hours or so per day, per week, however that math is playing out. And I like being able to take, like, to me, that sounds like a really great top to bottom approach of recognizing value on automation versus a more bottom up approach would say, it takes you this amount of time to perform this task. You perform this task this amount of times. This is how many hours it takes you. Consider that cost on time. And now say, what if we bought that time back for you at this price, right? What would that time mean to you versus I like the top to bottom, meaning this is how much this time is equivalent to in terms of the value that you're bringing home every year in this case. And as a result of me taking that process and converting it into giving it a 95% reduction on cost of time used, now you effectively and this is where the math gets interesting because you have a price point that you're going to deliver on. But this relationship is essentially she's making $18,000. She's generating $18,000 without spending the time equivalent to that $18,000 based on the
Yes.
workflow that's being automated in this particular example.
Yep. That's exactly right.
And so,
And
can I ask you what was the cost of that service ultimately?
so I gave her the friends and family discount, and
Fair enough.
she was at 900. So she paid
Okay,
a one-time fee of $900 to get $20,000 back per year in perpetuity as long as she has that client.
as long as she has that client, as long as she's performing that workflow.
Right.
Okay.
And I also helped her believe that it can be done. So the next time she has a client that is eating 8, 10, 12 hours, she's not going to waste a bunch of time trying to figure it out. She's going to come to me and say, can you immediately give me my time back?
She'll be back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that that's great business for you and that's great business for her. Some will argue that the client on the other end of that story is like, well, wait a minute, not why am I not getting into this cost saving? It's like, well, who figured this out? Who put the workflow together? And this is always the thing that I love about because I work with a lot of people who they go right up to you. They're like, I want to automate this. I'm like, okay, what exactly are we automating? It's like, I don't know, but I want to automate it. And I'm like, well, I need to know what the operation is first before I can automate. Well, this is the result I want. Can't you just get there with automation? I'm like, I certainly can, but why don't I delegate it first? Why don't I systematize it first? Which sometimes does end up becoming the best form of automation. Like maybe the platform or the tool or the thing is already designed to take care of much of the workflow. Let
Mm-hmm.
me scope the project. And I think that's something that I recognize you're probably taking into account as well. Like every automation project can't just be approached by just saying, all right, I'm going to automate this. Like, no, I need to define the scope of what exactly it is I'm automating. How does this automation function? And that's part of the delivery itself. The
Oh,
automation is the end
100%.
result, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. It's an engineering at the end of the day.
Well, and it comes back to the algorithm that we were discussing before. You've got to be able to define the full process flow. And if I've got a situation where I don't have time to define the process flow, or the process flow is squirrely and I need to figure out exactly how it's going to shift, it would make all kinds of sense to hire somebody from your staff to do this process over and over again, document what you did, let me watch it. And now all of a sudden I've got the ranges of what I need to deal with, and I can define a process around that and possibly automate it.
Yeah. And that brings me to my sort of collaborative competitive mindset of like I love hourly, Chris. I love being able to go up to a client or a potential client and say, I really don't know what you need me to do yet. I know that you're suffering and I know you need to buy back your time and I know this workflow costs you energy and I've seen a lot. So hopefully, I have a good sense, but I don't know exactly what your conditions are just yet. I'm going to have to figure that out. And guess what? I'm going to take it on an hour by hour basis, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna approach this retainer, if you will. I'm not just going to say it's going to cost you $1,600 a month, and I'm going to give you 40 hours a week of my virtual assistant's time, and they're going to spend all that time figuring it out. No, we're just going to meet you on an hour to hour basis. Because I don't want my team dedicated to 40 hours a week if they don't need 40, if they only need 10 or 20. I don't know if they need 10
Mhm.
or 20 until they start getting into it. And you start showing them the ropes and they start responding and saying, okay, so this is what you're asking me to do exactly. And then have them, to your point, write it down, crystallize it, say, okay, well, this is sample 1 of this task flow. If this is going to be the same as sample 10, great. Oh, and am I going to be asked to do this every day? We should talk to Chris.
Mhm.
Whereas if it's sample 1, but now sample 2 is different, and now sample 3 is different, and now there's nuance every time, and I can't find the algorithm. There is no algorithm. It's on a nuanced case by case basis.
Mhm.
Well, now the hourly retainment makes sense because now you're just paying me
Absolutely.
for the time it takes to be productive towards this workflow, given how nuanced it is every single time it needs to be done.
Mm. I often say that everything that can be automated should be automated, but that doesn't mean that everything can be automated.
I like that.
Okay. It would be so handy for me to automate Valentine's cards to my wife. Do you think she would appreciate the computer generated Valentine's card? No, that's not something I should automate. So just, yeah, everything that can should, but not everything should. So when I look at something like this and your situation, I think I talked to you about hiring somebody to help me with email. Email is such a nuanced thing, and I hate email. I just hate email.
Because it's
Okay,
not
if you want to get a
algorithmic.
hold of me, call me. I'm called old. It's like, you're such an old man. You want to talk on the phone? It's like, no, I can get so much done in a 5-minute phone call that I can't get done in 10 email exchanges. It's a more efficient use of time. So I hate email, and I would love to have somebody that would just read through my emails and say, "This is what you need to do today. I took care of all the rest." And that's a active conversation that you and I are having now.
And that, to your point, and this is, I agree with you that inboxes in particular are amongst the most difficult and sometimes, frankly, nastiest types of workflows to flesh out, because they compel so much context. They compel so much nuance. Every relationship that reaches out to your inbox may do so under so many different examples. In relationships, I could say anything from individual beings to companies. Those are the two types of entities that are typically reaching out to you via email, and you have to decipher within each email a lot of the times what is the context of those emails, to the extent that you can then start to look at your inbox as a funnel, different workflows, different forwardings, different, if they reach out to you under this particular email, okay, push them down this track, right? You can have support emails and info emails, all that. But case in point, that in and of itself is trying to take the top of funnel of inbox and to algorithmically sort it to the best of your ability into definable filters that you then say, okay, well, based on these types of information, I need to process in the following format XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
So that is scope. That's a lot of scoping, right? And that's a
Yes.
never ending scope, because you're always going to be taking on new experiences. Who better than to have an executive assistant who just understands
Mm-hmm.
good inbox management, knows how to sort, knows your business, talks with you every day, and says, Chris, what's in today's inbox? Here's what I saw. Here's what I thought about it. I chewed on it for you, so now we can digest it completely together.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've ever read the 4 Hour Work Week, there's there's a fantastic section where the guy is talking about outsourcing, and he says, I wonder if I could outsource love letters to my wife. I wonder if I could outsource my neuroses. And and he writes to his executive assistant, and she says, "I promise you, I will worry about this every day for you."
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
great. I would love to have that. So,
Yeah. I think a good executive assistant has they recognize the relationship to the executive. And I know it comes across very case in point in the title of the name, but a lot of people just don't know what that feels like, to have someone who is literally sitting there saying, you have a lot of things to execute on, and I'm going to help you execute on those things.
mm-hmm.
Just tell me what you need help with. I'll try to figure out. I'll ask you questions, but I'll try to figure it out. And it's just what it is. It's just an assistant. It's help. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we can get into some more detailed conversations around how AI and its role as an agent, as opposed to just a tool, is becoming more and more involved, not only with supplanting and supporting executive assistants, but just by proxy of, just like, for instance, I was talking earlier with someone. I said, one of the things that holds me back from my email the most is that, to your point, if I could talk it out, man, I would be done with this email yesterday. The
Yeah.
problem is that I have to think it out, and then I have to type it out, and then I have to edit it, and that sucks. So
Yes.
what I'd rather have is, I'd rather have an AI with agency read my email with me and then say, Conrad, what do you want to say? How do you want to respond to this email? Right? Because I know you've got some context going on. Something's going on in your mind, right? This is actually the workflow I do with my EAs every day. So I kind of
Mm-hmm.
want AI to be my EA in a certain respect in this particular workflow. So I sit down with Rose and I literally tell her, this is how I want this email to go. And she writes it. And I take the draft, I refine it, and I hit send. Or if I trust her with that type of email, I just say, Rose, just hit send on my behalf. I know you've got it. I know you figured it out. You've done this enough times already. I want the same experience with AI. The only context here on the technical side is I need a voice to text experience. I don't want to
Yeah.
type the context to AI. I want to speak the context to AI, and I want to let it figure out what I just said and combine that along with the email thread to then create a template.
We're very close to that. I don't know if you've downloaded ChatGPT to your iPhone yet,
I haven't
but
downloaded it to my iPhone per se, but
it's
now
it's a
you're
completely different experience. Hey, get this. I had a good friend of mine from Russia here, and he speaks English better than I do, so he and I had no trouble communicating.
huh.
But I put the Chat GPT on my phone and said, I told it, said, I'm going to speak English, and my friend only speaks Russian. Anytime you hear English, translate it to Russian, and anytime you hear Russian, translate it to English. Don't be asked, just do it. And he and I got to have a two-way conversation. I am me only speaking English, him only speaking Russian, and it translated it
In real
perfectly
time.
in real time. It was amazing. So we are right on the cusp of being able to do exactly what you're talking about. And another friend of mine, just showed me Copilot, so like the premium version of Copilot. And I said, I'd really love to have exactly what you're talking about, an AI assistant for email. He said, well, use premium Copilot. And I said, show me. So he told Copilot, summarize all the emails I got today and give me a task list. And boom, it started saying, you got 12 emails today. Here are the main topics, and here's a task list that I pulled from these 4. Like, okay, it's getting close. It's really getting close. So we're almost there to be able to just say, summarize my email for me.
Yeah. There's a funny meme out there right now that says like, "Hey, I just got ChatGPT to write out this really elaborate email for me," and then on the other side of it, "Hey, I just got ChatGPT to summarize this really lengthy email that I just got." Um, and I want to say that there is something to be said about um, humans still maintaining a part of this workflow, right? And not
Yes.
replacing their essence of what they're trying to communicate onto the bot and have the bot communicate on their behalf. Because at the end of the day, your influence matters, right? If you relinquish all agency to the bots, then who are you? Like, what's left of you in terms of the nature of what you bring to the world, in terms of business? Um, I was just catching up on my ritualistic watching of The Daily Show with the old man, and we saw Yuval Noah Harari, the famous author of *Sapiens*, amongst other books,
Mm-hmm.
talking about this very concept of like AI has transferred our expectations of technology from tool-assisted experience to agent-assisted experience, and the main difference is that this was his example, which I thought was particularly compelling. Even the atom bomb is a tool. Human beings still had to make the decision around what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
AI does not need human interaction in order to make decisions. That's the kind of wild part. It's incredibly
Yeah.
transformative because it's what we rely on when we work with virtual assistants and any other type of associates in our network, right? That's why we work with people, because people have agency.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're not the only ones.
Yeah, and that's I think that's true to a point. We don't have general superintelligence. We don't even have general relative intelligence yet. We're close. And what that means is, when I first encountered ChatGPT, I thought, this is superhuman. People are going to pray to this. And for a brief while, there was a church of AI. It's gone defunct. Once I started to play with it more, I realized this is a fancy hammer. And it's meant to be a tool to assist with a process. To your point, you've still got to be part of it because it can't fully replicate my personality.
It's
It's
not a
coming
carpenter yet.
close. It's coming. Yeah, that's exactly right. But what one of the things that concerns me with AI is, as long as people continue to utilize it, more and more AI generated data is going to be pushed out. And that AI generated data is going to be used to teach the next models of the large language, the LLMs. So you've got, that garbage in, garbage out idea.
Junk begets junk. Cancer grows.
Yes. So at what point does truth and fiction just fully blend to the point that you don't know what to trust? I mean, you've already got deep fakes now, where it's harder to trust your eyes on a video. It used to be, show me the video evidence. Now you can't even trust that because the video evidence can be so faked. Yeah,
Right.
it's
Authenticity comes into question.
yeah,
In its very in the very nature of what it even means to be authenticatable. And
yeah.
yet here we stand on the sort of counter to that, which is blockchain technology, which is designed to say, hey, I can attach every single piece of information humanly possible to a chain that can be verified by the sheer nature of just but by the sheer nature of the transparency of that chain system and the fact
Mhm.
that to manipulate it would be incredibly, incredibly difficult. It would require a level of power consolidation so strong that by the time you've reached that state of power, everyone else would be walking away from the system altogether. That was kind of Bitcoin's
Uh,
big promise, right? That like no one's gonna be able to take this thing over because it's so decentralized at this point, and good luck changing the rules because people are just not going to participate in that system. The whole reason why people are participating in that system.
yeah, I love Bitcoin. It took me a while to get there. I had the opportunity to buy Bitcoin at $130 a coin.
Don't
And I
I
thought,
had to talk to
and
my
I was
parents
looking at
about
the
this.
spike. I was looking at the spike saying, this thing is so overbought. There's no way it's going to continue. Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
I've made several dumb decisions in my life. That one was a good one. But I do love the decentralized nature of it. I mean, if you look, and I know that we're kind of getting off of the automation
We'll come
topic,
back.
but I love, you look at fiat currency. You and I have no control over fiat currency. And fiat currency is just currency that a government says is worth something.
Right.
It's only worth it because a government says so. You've got things that aren't fiat currency like gold, silver, Bitcoin, so non-standard currencies. And I love the idea of the inflation protection that can come with something like Bitcoin.
Right.
One of the challenges, though, is Bitcoin is not fully decoupled from the fiat currencies because as the stock market goes down, Bitcoin pulls back, partly because people have to sell their Bitcoin to cover losses
Right.
in the market.
Well, that's because we're still participating in it. It's not like the relationship is tied because people as a whole are still operating on both ends, right? We've got our foot in two
Mm,
boats.
yeah.
So unless we operated completely on a decentralized system in which everyone agrees, which governments and many of the folks who are currently winning in the fiat currency market are like, why would I exit my position here? Like, why
No.
would I why
Yeah.
would I level my own playing field? I'm already at an advantage. No.
Yes. Well, that's where the central bank digital currency is coming in.
Right.
And the central bank digital currency is the U.S. government's answer to Bitcoin and decentralized money. The problem with something like a CBDC is you have no ability to hold your money in your hand. I can't go to the bank and even cash out my central bank digital
There's
currency.
a lack of financial sovereignty.
Yes, that's exactly right. So with that, you effectively have coupons that you can use or vouchers that you can use that will expire at a certain time.
Yes. And I always like to equate my favorite way of describing money is how many dinners is that? How much chicken is that? Like I want to me money in a certain sense like it's food stamps in its own respect, right? With respect to what I literally hand in this stamp of paper and I can get food from it. Well, I have so many food stamps. I actually don't need to buy food. Cool. Well, now you can go buy all these other things, right? You can pay into other discrepancies of God, what's the word I'm looking for? Um,
Yeah, you have
Disposable income is what I mean.
yeah.
My point being, you have got so much food stamps, you don't even need to buy food with it anymore. You can actually trade your food stamps for other things so that other people can buy food and you can go buy the things that you want beyond just food
Mm-hmm.
because Maslow's hierarchy. Um, but to your point, um, if I'm relying on food stamps that are owned and controlled by this larger entity, and I have no means to just kind of carry my food stamps with me and apply them wherever I go, I'm beholden to that relationship. Okay,
Yes.
that's a dependency,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't like dependencies.
No, and you're exactly right, and that's one of the reasons it's so dangerous. Is right now I can take money out of the bank and I can go use my cash money to buy anything that I want, and I don't have to explain it to anybody. And that's there's we are supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. But if I don't have the ability to use my money in ways that benefit me and please me or make me happy, what about my pursuit of happiness? I, then I don't have freedom.
I'm going to share with you a fun story. We're just gonna walk off the rails hill for just a second. But I'm going to share you a fun story. I'm currently dealing right now with a my homeowners association. We're dealing with a board of directors that has clearly demonstrated actions that fall against the laws and requirements that they have, both to us as a board based on our bylaws, but also based on Florida statutes. And what's fascinating is like, I don't have, I can't, I can't pursue legal consequence because the cost of pursuing that consequence is too high compared to other sort of business logics that are going to just perform based on time and the next election of that particular board and all the other things that are going on. Like I can't undo or injunct them on any of these applications that they're performing, despite the fact that I know very well that they're doing so, quite frankly, illegally, and beyond the scope of what most would consider good business judgment by fiduciary duty. I let a judge argue that in their own right because that's their responsibility, not mine. Um, you know, but I can't speak without incriminating myself that the behaviors that they performed are clearly falling outside the scope of what's considered lawful. And so I say to you on that point, it's like the cultural aspect of like what is freedom, what is ideal, what do we actually cherish. It is amazing to me that what terrifies me about these ideals is that when they're broken, the means of seeking retribution, justice for those broken, it's hard. It actually costs a ton, and so there's almost a win. There's not only just a window. There's a time window and also a financial window in which something can be. It's like the cost of doing something illegal, right? We talk about that a lot in business, where it's like businesses can pay off to perform an action that is otherwise considered wrong, illegal, immoral, otherwise, but it's essentially the cost of doing business in that particular manner, and the profit's greater than the cost of the illegal action, right? That pisses everybody off, at least those who are not on the winning side of that decision.
But you bring up two points. One is you talked about the justice system, and I don't believe that we have a justice system in America. We have a legal system. If we had a justice system, then justice would often be served, but it's not. We have a legal system, and because of that, we have problems like what you're talking about, where the cost to get justice is too great. It's greater than the cost to find a workaround or to stick a move or do something different. So you've got those trade-offs. Then you talked about the penalties and the fees. I look at the banks all the time, and the banks, this bank got hit with $20 billion fine, and that bank got hit with $30 billion fine. But they don't talk about how that bank made $50 billion by doing this.
Right.
So the $20 billion fine, to your point, is a cost of doing business.
Cost of goods sold.
That's exactly. I was just about to say that's their cogs. They're not worried about that.
Yeah.
And everybody knows how the game is played. Many of the banks that are doing this are on the Federal Reserve. So they're setting the rules. They know what the penalties are going to be if it comes, and they know the penalties are less than the profits. So there's no, you've heard a contract with no teeth?
Yep.
It has no teeth.
Yeah, these are slaps on the wrist, and by the time any type of teeth can come about and cause that kind of consequence, and this, unfortunately, people can get frustrated to the level where they seek out retribution, and as a result, they end up performing actions that can then be consequential to them. And so, again, to your point, the cost of seeking actual justice becomes more deadly than it's worth.
Were you getting into the Bubba effect?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Bubba effect?
No. Tell me more.
So the Bubba effect is something that the military has talked about, and I've heard military strategists talk about. It's one of the biggest concerns that they have. So it's a situation like this. You look at Springfield, Ohio, right now is being overrun with Haitian immigrants.
Yeah,
it's a population of 60,000. They've got 20,000 new immigrants coming in, so a third of their population boost in people that don't have residency in that area. And they're crying out saying something's got to be done. And their government's looking at them going, no, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
So at some point, somebody is going to take action into their own hands and try to rectify it because the authorities are not doing it.
Right.
But when that happens and the authorities try to crack down on that person who took action, the community is going to come around that person and say, no, They did wrong. Bubba did wrong. He shouldn't have done that. But you weren't controlling it. We will deal with Bubba, not you. And
Take matters
all
into
of a
their own
sudden,
hands.
that's exactly right. But also policing their own.
Right.
And
Maintaining
whenever you have,
maintaining cultural maintaining a certain cultural integrity, but barring in mind that the reason why that integrity was lost for that particular relationship was due to the fact that there was a larger societal creation of that led to that disintegration.
yes.
Okay, I want to figure out how to tie all this back into automation real quick, and I think I have an idea. So I think what I'm recognizing through our conversation, Chris, lovely to have you. Love the nature of the derailment of these conversations, and we started on a great spot. We ended in a neat little area, but we'll bring it back. I promise. When we as a business, when we as business owners and as business professionals explore the nature of our operations and realize that in order for us to serve good, in order for us to do impact, there's a certain amount of work that needs to get done. When we recognize that there is a valid business case, right, to what it is that we're accomplishing, and we can go, look, I'm able to trade this amount of time and energy and service towards this op, and as a result I'm able to net out this payment in terms of like this is the community's way of saying thank you for your service, like here's your reward, right? I'm able to mark that. You can then come in and say, or I can come in and then say, we can come in and then say, let's look at that operation quite closely. Is there a routine to it? Is there a pattern to it? Can we justify the cost of going into that workflow, recreating it such that it's no longer you dedicating time and energy to it? You've identified the process. You've solved the business problem, but now to your point, we're going to solve it even better, and it's going to be that much more returning to you as the individual, as the owner of that object. And as a result, you now have this sort of interesting sovereignty over, this newfound workflow that again is yours. I mean, I want to recognize that the automations that you deliver on are presumably the owners at the end. Like they
Yep.
paid for that. That's their product after at the end of it all. And so I guess the funny way I'm going to tie this all back is I want to tie into the sort of sovereignty of what is ours, right? And when we come into businesses and when we express our own agency, we exist on this planet in a certain sense to solve problems. And once we've established sovereignty over a specific problem, ideally we can get all these augments to it that make it more and more efficient and effective for us. We reap the rewards. Ideally, those rewards are, the food stamps that we can take wherever we want. But needless to say, I think hopefully automation does us the justice of maximizing our rewards and giving us the a truer freedom to do what we want with our hard-earned capital. And hopefully we don't find ourselves in a different type of dystopia where despite all our efforts to work hard, none of our processes, none of our services are ultimately owned, or they're only owned temporarily because someone comes in, identifies them, pushes us out of the market and says like, I'm going to do this better, faster, cheaper than you because I have unlimited resources in the form of agents. I don't know. Maybe I'm back on maybe I'm back off the rails again with that, but would love your closing
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. I think that we shouldn't waste any time worrying about what we might not be able to do tomorrow. I get my wife did such a good job of helping me with I'd get wrapped up in politics, and I don't care if you're left, right, middle, it doesn't matter. People get wrapped up and passionate about things that they frankly can't control. And
Which is
she
dangerous, frankly.
it really is. But she said, okay, tell me, out of all these things you're complaining about, which one can you fix right now? Well, none. She said, then why are you moaning? Quit it.
Yeah.
Focus on what you can control. And us worrying about what somebody might take or do better down the road, it's not our concern. Apple is never looking back and wondering what Microsoft is doing. Apple is always looking forward, knowing that others are going to try to copy them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you and I need to be. We need to be looking forward. What problems can we solve? How can we be effective? How can we maximize not only our value, our profits, our contribution to society? If we're focused on that, these other things are just the penny pinches of life that we'll have to deal with as we go.
Keep an eye on them, but don't let them run you. I'm going to take your wife's "Why Are You Moaning" and convert it into Chris, where's your agency? Really, right? Go focus
Yeah,
on that.
that's exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. So there was one other thing that I wanted to chat about,
Yeah.
and it was why automation versus hourly.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a tug of war because I absolutely understand why in the service that you provide that you would want to charge hourly, and partly it's because of the unknown. The person or the
The
group buying
undefined
your
scope.
services, yeah, they don't know necessarily what their need is going to be. However, once we do know what the need is, at that point we can start having conversations about value pricing as opposed to hourly pricing. You mentioned Clint before. We've got Clint on a project. Clint's doing a bang up job, just taking all kinds of stress off of me. Now we can have the conversation. Okay, I'm thinking about moving Clint to a different project. What would it be worth to you to keep Clint on this? You've already established a rapport. He knows your business. He's adding more value now than he was a month or 2 months ago. Instead of doing an hourly, don't you think that Clint's time is worth X?
Right.
And that, if they agree to that, that opens you up to be able to use automations in Clint's work. So now instead of Clint spending 15 hours or 20 hours a week doing this, we can use automations and get him down to half that or better. And you're not sacrificing your revenue to do it. You're still delivering a quality product. And this is what I'm doing with many of my clients.
Yeah.
I have a tool called flatratequote.com that is focused on bookkeepers, that is designed specifically to move them from hourly pricing to salary pricing based on the value proposition. You are not a commodity. You are selling a value. You have value above just an hourly number. And if you can talk to your client and show them the value that you have, they will want to pay you a salary because they can budget that. They understand that. They know you're not nickel and diming them and working 12 hours because Christmas is coming up and you want to buy gifts for your kids. You set it up, say, okay, I agree to this price. You agree to work in that price. And then you use automation tools to bring your hourly rate down, your hours worked, your hourly rate way up, your hours worked way down. And now you have your time back that you can go and get more business. You can serve more clients. You can coach Little League. You can take that class you've been planning to take. You have more control over your time and you have the freedom of agency.
Chris, you designed this product, Flat Rate Quote, for bookkeepers specifically.
I did,
And
yeah.
yet, from when we last spoke, the design of what you're putting together as a calculator essentially is something that can be more robustly built out for other types of workflows as well. I would like to invite
Absolutely.
you at your option that we continue the conversation of automation versus hourly and the evolution of Flat Rate Quote in our next episode.
That would be great. Well, and Conrad, it's been amazing being here. I love these conversations. So thank you for inviting me.
Chris, thank you for being here. Folks, thank you for listening. Looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Until then, be well.